Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, October 27th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. One for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room is open. I did pop the link in there to what we're looking at, a website called Soul Expressions, Abuse Recovery, and it's good stuff. And she's got a lot of information there. I hope you'll check that out. That's what we're going to continue talking about today. So I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my shows here on Blog Talk Radio, and I say this on every show. I'm just not sure who's maybe tuning in for the first time, and I don't want people to get the idea that I'm a therapist or counselor. I'm just a survivor of my healing journey, and this is my healing journey. I'm just doing a little bit, talk therapy, and I also wanted to just to let other survivors know, that we're not alone and that there is help out there. We just have to look for it. We have to reach out. And I didn't realize that until about 4.5 years ago now. March, April next year will be 5 years that I've been on my healing journey. So, before that I was sitting around thinking, I wish somebody could take away my pain, I wish somebody could help me, feel better, and I didn't realize it was going to have to be me to do it. I didn't clue in until that time. So I just wanted to be one more voice out here, really just a voice of encouragement, and also just another voice speaking out about child abuse. There's not enough people talking about it, even though there are people that are talking about it. I want to be one more voice because, honestly, mainstream society, it's no wonder. It's such a horrible subject. It's a horrible situation, like for anybody who's ever been abused, the abuse was shoved under the carpet anyway. Usually that's the case, and then, society doesn't want to hear about it, so it's just shut away again, right? Because most people don't want to know about it and don't want to hear about it. So I just wanted to be one more resource for people, to at least get some validation. You know what I mean? Like, we've been abused, and so many times people will say, well, so get over it. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, you try to get over that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't wish this stuff on anybody. I really don't. And yet I wish other people who didn't really know what it's like would at least try to walk a minute in our shoes, just to see, from that perspective, what it would possibly be like to have been abused as a child and have to pick up the pieces and try to make something out of our lives. So, it's I just want to be one more voice. So yeah, you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows, And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask you have permission to listen to my shows, because my shows are, there's a lot of adult content on my shows. They're not for younger children, and I don't know how young people are who are listening. So you have to do the right thing. And if you're under the age of 18, you need to get an adult, somebody in your life, a parent or somebody in your family or somebody who's older, who's an adult, who can help you make a decision whether you should be listening to my shows, right? Because it's important to protect yourself. Like, all children have the right to protection, even though obviously, we're not getting that protection, and we never did, and people still aren't. But you need to do that for yourself. So if you're under the age of 18 and under, you do that for yourself. You learn how to protect yourself, right? So there's all kinds of websites out there. Internet safety, online safety for children. There's lots of great information out there on how to protect yourself and keep yourself safe online, right? So make sure you do that. So we'll get right into this website here, and I've got my good friend here in the chat room, Gypsy Witch, and I've got a guest here. It's nice. Thanks very much for being here. We're looking at self-expressions, abuse recovery. This is Becky. She's written all of this stuff here. There's a lot of great information here. If you scroll down the left-hand side of the page there, you can see that she has tons of links and all kinds of pages, web pages, built into this website, Soul Expressions Abuse Recovery, at www.soul-expressions-abuse-recovery.com. And if she's online, she has a little online, what do you want to call that, little button that you can see whether she's online or not. And she's a therapist, and she says, if I'm online, you can get a hold of me, and we can chat, right? So, she's not online right now, I don't think, but it's there. So, this is a great resource for people. I want to take a look at why self-abusive behaviors and suicidal thoughts, looking at self-abuse, right? And she says, hurt myself? Why? She says, self-abuse behaviors sound strange, doesn't it? After you have already been abused, but self-injurious and dangerous behaviors, including suicidal thoughts, are common among abuse survivors due to underlying feelings related to their abuse. And so she says, if you're reading this, you probably are either researching this topic to understand it, a parent or loved one of someone who is acting out self-abusive behaviors or dangerous behaviors, and you want to understand it, or you are the one who was abused and do this to yourself, and you want to know why you are doing it. And so self-abuse, self-injury, you know, a lot of people do that. And, you know, I mean, I know people, I won't mention names, who cut and do different things like that. And I know myself, always had tendencies to want to self-injure. And she goes on to sort of talk about why people do this sort of thing. She says, I will talk about self-abusive behaviors in 3 categories: self-mutilating or cutting, self-destructive relationships, and alcohol, drug abuse. So she says the first self-abusive behavior I'll talk about is self-mutilation or cutting on yourself. She says, why would you do this? Well, when you were sexually abused, the person who abused you tried to take away your power and left you feeling powerless. She says, I have also mentioned before that another coping mechanism to abuse is dissociation. And that is a method of mentally checking out or spacing out, as some people call it. The experience is so traumatic that the person cannot handle it, so the brain shuts down, and the person actually mentally leaves the situation in a way. And the brain is really amazing, she says. Sometimes people can forget their abuse altogether because of this coping mechanism, at least on the surface. Subconsciously, the abuse is still there in your memory. So she says there are many levels of shutting down emotionally, and people who cut on themselves have told me that emotionally they could not feel the pain from the abuse, so they felt numb. And by cutting on themselves and seeing the actual action of cutting and seeing the blood from the cut, it was a physical release of pain from inside. So I've heard this from other people too. I'm not really a cutter, and never really did do any cutting, but I know lots of people who have. And I always, they've been in therapy for years, and they'll say stuff like, well, you can try things like just anything else other than cutting, like snapping a rubber band around your wrist sort of thing. And some people said that worked. Some people said that, what else? There was a couple other things, but I know that was one, with the rubber bands around your wrist. You can just snap those whenever you feel like you want to cut, because that produces a little bit of pain, but it doesn't hurt you, right? And so, they felt numb, right? That's why they do that, so they can feel something. For me, my problem was I felt too much. So it's not that I was numb and I couldn't feel anything. My problem was I felt way too much. So my situation was that I was able to feel, and it was killing me, you know what I mean? Because I could feel way too much pain, way too much anger, way too much distress from the abuse that I suffered as a child. And I'd go to work all day and I'd be fine, sitting around work, no problem. Because I'm always, I'm a hard worker. I always been pretty dedicated to a job, and I'll go to work, no problem, work. And then come home, and at the end of the day, it's just me again. And it's like, oh, it's just me. It's me and my life and my past abuse. And so the feelings would just be too intense, So people didn't know that, like at work, that I would be coming home thinking about killing myself or contemplating, planning my suicides again, contemplating suicide and wanting to self-injure. I really wanted to self-injure, but I didn't want to cut like small little cuts. I really wanted to rip myself to shreds. And I used to stop myself, thank God. But because I would think, I'll just end up in the hospital and then I'll end up in a psych ward. And, I was able to actually stop myself from doing that. But, I wanted to. That was the pain that was in my heart, that I just wanted to rip myself to shreds, and it's a sad situation. It's a hard situation to be in. And, I was in on it on my own because I wasn't really reaching out to anybody. And that's what happened almost 5 years ago now, 4.5 years ago, that I just decided to not do that anymore. You know what I mean? And I realized that I had been through enough. I was like, okay, haven't I been through enough? Like, I'm already in enough pain. Like, why would I want to self-injure? Nobody's going to care. The world's not going to care. My abuser family that's still living, which isn't very many of them, they're not going to care. They don't care now. They didn't care then, and they really don't care. So why am I doing this? I had to seriously think why. I was always contemplating my suicides and always wanting, to self-injure and stuff. And I thought, it's not going to help anything. Nobody's going to care if I die. Nobody's going to come to my funeral. And it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't fix my past. The only thing they would do would be to get me out of this pain, And I thought, that's ridiculous. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Two of my brothers killed themselves. So, I just thought, this is ridiculous. I have to fight. I have to fight to win this fight. against my parents especially, and one of my brothers, they couldn't kill me. You know what I mean? And so I just got really serious about my commitment to myself, that I would never ever even think about self-injuring again, and I wouldn't even think about planning my suicides. And that was 4.5 years ago. Well, in March, April of 2007. And so I made that commitment that day, or that night, actually that afternoon, that evening, and I never did that again. That's the last time. I've had some bad days, some bad times, just like everybody else. But I haven't gone back to that place because I made a huge commitment to myself, and I was able to do it. But maybe not everybody else can. I know people who still cut, and they've been in therapy for years, and so it's a serious issue. And for me, I've been through a lot of the websites that talk about cutting and self-injury, and they always say, really, it's best not to tell these people, oh, don't cut, because they're people are going to cut whether you tell them not to, or their therapists are telling them probably not to cut, and they're still cutting. So they have to make up their own minds, when they can find something else to cope, because really it is just a coping mechanism. And for me, my big coping mechanism is cigarettes. That's bad because I really need to quit. And, I've been trying to quit smoking I've been smoking since I was like 12, and it's the addiction that I don't like. It's not smoking. I actually don't care. I like smoking. But it's the addiction. I'm just so tired of being addicted to these things, But I have a huge addictive personality, and so does all my family members, and we all did. And it's just because we're trying to fill something that just wasn't there. You know what I mean? We're trying to fill something from our childhood, trying to fill that empty place, that thing that says, feed me, nurture me, love me, take care of me. That thing that says, I can't breathe, I'm drowning, and mainly, that comes from a lot of anxiety issues, from being abused, I'm sure of it. So I've been smoking for a long time, and I thought, man, if I could kick this addiction, that'd be great. Because I got off everything else. I got off the drugs, and I don't drink, really. So it's just the cigarettes, and it's like, man, that's just one last addiction I just really need to get rid of. And it's hard because, I hang on to them for many reasons. But she talks about that later. But she says, just the image of the cutting the blood makes the pain real because you can at least see it, right? Many people have told me that they get a sense of relief after they cut on themselves, but only for a short time, and this is an extremely dangerous self-destructive behavior. Yeah, because it's a relief, but it doesn't last. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when I have one cigarette, it's a relief, but then it doesn't last, and I have to have another cigarette. It's the same thing. I mean, if it's an addictive behavior, and it's what you use to cope, right? And it's like it's whatever you're doing to use to cope. Some people are shopaholics. They have to be buying all the time, purchasing all the time. They're not happy, and then they buy something and they're happy for about 10 minutes or 2 days, and then they have to go back out and buy something else because that's what brings them some sort of peace or some sort of coping mechanism that they use. Some people use food, Some people use sex. I mean, there's so many different things that people use to fill that, to try to fill that place in us that can't be filled with anything like that, So it never lasts, and it just keeps going and going and going, and all of it can be self-destructive. So she says, if you do not do this cutting and stuff, she says it probably sounds pretty strange, but if you cut on yourself, then it probably makes some sense. So people who do this also seem to feel that they have this under control, and it also is about a sense of control. As I said, your power and control was taken away from you when you were abused, but remember, it is a false sense of control. So she says, I know that you think you need to feel control, but there are other healthy ways of having control or choices. So she talks about this. She says, I feel this self-abusive behavior is very dangerous, and that you need professional help if you're doing it, or if you know someone that is engaging in it. There is no controlled cutting. So please get some professional help, she says, before you hurt yourself or engage in self-destructive behaviors. And she talks about dangerous relationships. Her specialty, she says. Many women, especially, cycle through bad relationships with men or women who continue to emotionally, physically, or sexually abuse them. And this can also be friends that you hang out with. So she said, this is the most common behavior I see. I have worked with hundreds of women and teens, and I know this to be true of myself. She says, after you were abused, especially if you're a young girl, you were left with no self-esteem and no sense of what a healthy relationship looked like for yourself, and your power had been taken away from you, she says. So she says, your logical mind, your family, your friends, your church, everyone you know may tell you that you deserve a healthy relationship. But unless you have addressed your sexual abuse, that little abused girl inside of you says to you that you are not good enough or pretty enough to deserve a healthy relationship. And that little damaged child inside of you is who you are going to listen to until she is healed. So I believe that to be true because it was true for me, for so many women. Because she's a survivor too. This woman who wrote this, who actually created this website here. She's a therapist and she's a survivor. So she says, I have to say too that being in dramatic, scary relationships is also an addiction and keeps you from focusing on your sexual abuse. We as abuse victims will sometimes do anything to avoid dealing with our pain, even create more pain, sad but true. And that's true, right? I mean, all of this stuff is true. Like I know that I was talking about that on a show not too long ago. It was maybe a month ago or so, where many times if you've been abused as a child for so long, and the abuse just continues on and on and on, and there's no normal functioning around. It's just total chaos, total dysfunction, which is what I grew up in. Just having a normal life is not exciting enough. Like when I was a teenager, especially a young teen, like 13, 14, 12, 13, 14, I was so used to being abused and living in this environment where there was violence was just the norm. And that was from all the family members, not just one. I mean, my mother was violent, my dad was violent, my brothers were violent. My sister wasn't really violent. She was just violent towards me, but she was not violent towards her friends or anything, but just violent neighborhood I grew up in a violent city, in a violent state in the United States. And violence was just normal. I mean, my school was notoriously violent, and the high school that I went to, I started high school when I was 12, and ninth grade, and it was a horrible school, and it was full of all kinds of gangs and riots and stuff. And they used to have the news would be there to film these riots that would be going on. There'd be like riot police there and riot squads, and it was pretty bad. People would be getting hurt and people would be getting shot, and it was a bad school, something like you might see out of like New York City or something, or L.A. or something like that. It was pretty bad, and it was just a violent life for me. I just experienced a lot of violence, so that was just the way that I thought life should be. So for me, if there wasn't some sort of crisis or chaos, or somebody wasn't getting hurt, or there wasn't some sort of violence going on, it was pretty boring, And so as an adult, especially I'd say a young adult, in my 20s, when I started to get, more of a better life for myself, out working, and I went to school for a couple of years, and tried to, I got off the drugs and everything, got myself straightened up, which was great. That just, I wanted to be away from that violence, but yeah, it was really. It's almost addictive. Like I used to crave it because I used to just hanging around with people who were violent. I mean, then after I started hanging around with people who were just like me, who were abused as children and were drug users, and of course we all got along really well because we knew where we were coming from, and we did support each other mostly. But there was for a period of time, right around 19, 20. I'd say around 19, 20, 21 years old, about 3-year period where things really got extremely violent between a bunch of us. My best friend's boyfriend was a major drug addict, and he was he used to shoot up, and he would do cocaine and crystal meth and I don't know, speedball, and I mean it was just absolutely horrible. But the guy was a huge drug addict. I don't even know if he's still alive. He might be, but he was always he was abused as a child, and he was always abusing my friend, they were living together, right? And so I was always trying to protect my friend, and I would end up getting hurt in the process because he didn't want me around protecting, his girlfriend. He wanted me gone, and so he would threaten my life and stuff. And one time he was choking me and saying, I could kill you right now. And that's what I was used to as a child. My mother used to choke me and slap me around, beat me up, and say, I'm gonna kill you. That was my mom's favorite saying. She'd be like, I'm gonna kill you, you rotten, blah blah blah. Yeah, so this is the thing, like I might just grew up like that. So then by the time, I hit my 20s, I was like, oh my God, do I have to still live like this, even with my friends? Like I got to start choosing better people. Not that I don't love my friends. Don't get me wrong. Those people were there for me in a time when I really needed them, and I thought that I was there for them too because I used to try to help them when I could. This is the thing, we all needed each other. But around 2021, I started to think, man, isn't there some other kind of life, that a person could live without having a fist in your face, or being choked and thrown into walls and stuff, like head bashed in? Can we not have like some other kind of life, Like, do I have to live this way the rest of my life, I started to question things, I was like, this is really bad. Like, I mean, I had other friends who didn't live like that, I had some people that just had these decent lives, in my life. Like, I had some friends in high school that I remembered back to, that some of my friends in high school actually hung out with were pretty, their stuff pretty straight, but their families were cool. Like, their families were good people, And I used to go to their house and hang out and stuff, and they, their families were decent, right? And I could see that, and it wasn't like Leave It to Beaver Cleaver. I mean, one of the families I used to hang out with was kind of like that, but some of them, they were just normal families, and they weren't, they weren't hurting each other, they weren't hurting their children, they weren't hurting, the parents were hurting each other, everything was pretty cool. And I thought, man, there are other people living, violence-free life. You know what I mean? There's people out there that are not living a violent lifestyle, full of drugs and drug use and all kinds of horrible stuff. Like, I can have that too. I started to really crave that, and but the other stuff is addicting because it's what you're used to. So if I wasn't out, getting high and living in getting involved in some sort of violent activity, it was pretty boring, right? So that's what I totally understand what she's talking about there. That a lot of times as abuse survivors, we'll seek out relationships like that because it's what we know. It's what we're used to. It's what we're comfortable with, Like now, like I'm so, like really honest to God, like I've been removed from my abusive, even from my abusive city where I used to live for 16 years now. So, I mean, that's great because I'm 16 years away from that, you know what I mean? Like my life is 16 years more on the other side of non-abusive type stuff, you know what I mean? Obviously. And it's just now, just getting through the past, getting through the stuff that I needed to deal with that I never dealt with before. And so, but I don't allow people to abuse me now, you know what I mean? And like I'm not abusing anybody, so it's great because, it's wonderful. Like, I mean, this is the way it should be. It shouldn't have to be, looking for that. It's absolutely horrific that people do, but they do. And they'll enter into all kinds of relationships that are hurtful and, destructive, and because that's all they know. That's all they're comfortable with. And that's, that's bad. But that's how a lot of people end up, a lot of abuse survivors. So if you're in that kind of relationship, man, think about what you're doing and think about, that we do deserve to be treated with dignity and with respect. And, there's all kinds of people. See, I grew up in hell, and then I went to school with people that were in hell because really that city that I grew up in was absolutely kind of horrible. And most of the people that I would associate with were gang members or people who were on the outside of the people who didn't fit into the box, obviously, right? I mean, I grew up in a poverty level area of the city, and I was hanging around with poverty level kids just right at the poverty line. And so we were all hanging out together, right? I couldn't really hang out with the other kids who were middle class or even upper class because there was nothing in common with them, you know what I mean? So most of the people I knew were either involved in gangs or, violent lifestyle, drug use and whatnot. And I would say stuff like that to them. I'd be like, you know what, this world shouldn't be like this. I would actually say things like that. And I'd be like, like some of my friends, I'd be sitting around, these were my close friends. I'd be like, I love you guys. We don't deserve to go out like in some sort of a crazy situation, just some sort of horrible death, And they would just look at me like, you're so full of garbage, because nobody was talking like that around them anyway, because we were all being abused, and we all grew up abused, right? So, but I told them, I said, no, it's true. Like, this is absolutely true. Like, we don't deserve this. We deserve to have, like, a good life, Like, and we need to make sure that happens. And a lot of those people would just look at me like, you've got to be kidding. And, like, that's so ridiculous, and I'd just be like, I don't care. This is the way I feel. Like, I know there has to be something better out there. Probably because I'm a bit sappy and I like to watch sappy movies, and I got a lot of really interesting information off the TV, right? And movies, right? I mean, I pretty well got all of anything that was any good, that was that's within me came from the TV and the movies. Honest to God, because my family wasn't the type to sit around and say, "Oh, we deserve something good," like we deserve to have a good life. It's like my family was like, "I'll kill you, you rotten whore," and you bastard, and oh yeah, it was just horrible. So I didn't learn that from home. I got that off the TV and watching a few other people's parents that I knew, who had a pretty decent life, and pretty decent relationships. So, I didn't learn that from my family, the people that I should have been learning it from. And so I took that into some of my, to hanging around with some of my friends. And I mean, some people used to be okay with what I said. Some of my friends, they'd be like, "Well, yeah, you're right," but most of them would be like, "You got to be kidding. That's just stupid." And I'd be like, "No, it's not. We shouldn't be going out in some sort of a violent death," because that's what I always thought. And even my friends, when we were growing up, because we're all the same types, right? We've been abused and involved in a whole lot of drug use, and just running around in the streets and getting in trouble with the police, and I mean just a mess. And some more than others, right? I managed to actually escape most of that getting in trouble stuff. There was only a few times that I actually had run-ins with the law, but mainly, I was pretty good about being careful, right? Because I didn't want to have a record. I knew a record. My brothers were in prison, in and out of prison all the time, and I didn't want to have a record following me, And so, I stayed pretty clear and was very careful to not get caught doing whatever I was doing. And my friends a lot of times wouldn't be like that, so they'd be in trouble with the law and stuff. And they, some of them would, I'd be like, "We don't want to die some violent, horrible death," but we all had been brought up and trained to think that, yeah, life is violent, and we were born in a violent situation, and we're probably going to die in a violent situation, because all of us, I think, had PTSD. When I think about it, like, we were all abused. All my friends that I hung out with, we had all grown up in these horrible environments, where there was no love, there was no care, there was nobody there to say, "You know what, I love you, son, I love you, daughter." There was no parent there to nurture, to care. That's why we all were on the streets doing drugs from a very young age. And, we thought for sure we came into a violent situation, we'll probably die in a violent situation. So we were basically setting ourselves up to do that. I mean, we used to drive crazy, and we used to have car accidents, and I mean, we would just be so high. Like, we would do incredible amounts of drugs, tables full of cocaine, and I mean, I'm talking, a lot of drugs, not a minimal amount. We were the extreme of this type of thing. You know what I mean? And so when I see these movies and stuff out here, and other people on the streets that are doing this type of lifestyle, I totally understand it and relate to it, but I don't like it, and I don't want it. It's not. See, I decided. I said, man, at the age of 21, I was like, I am done with that. I know exactly where I'm going to go. I'm going to end up dead on the street. I'm going to end up dead in a drug overdose. I'm going to end up dead in a drug deal gone bad. Because I'd already had guns in my head from drug deals gone bad. I was like, I'm going to be dead from some violent, stupid act because of drug abuse, drug addiction, or I'm going to end up in prison, or I'm going to end up killing myself in a car wreck because I'm just driving so high all the time, or killing somebody else. I was like, I know where I'm going. I know exactly where I'm going. Or I'll just waste away from drug use and die. I thought, no, I so deserve so much better. You know what I mean? So at the age of 21, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, why am I doing this? So I quit, and I got off the drugs, and I straightened myself up, and, I'm so glad that I did. My last addiction is cigarettes, like I said, and I'm still working on getting rid of that. But, if you're out there and you're struggling and you're just thinking, man, I don't know, I don't know if I can do this another day, you have to make really good decisions for yourself, and you have to stick around. You have to get some help, whatever help it is. Whatever help it makes you feel comfortable, some people like therapist, counselor. Some people like just talking to friends. Some people like group support. Whatever it is, you don't allow yourself to give up, to spiral down, and to waste this opportunity. Because my God, we certainly deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And we have to do that to ourselves too. We can't just expect other people to treat us with dignity and respect, but not us. I have to treat myself with dignity and respect first, and then I have to require it from other people, And so it does come very much from the internal, place, right? We have to do this, right? And then we have to put our foot down and set some boundaries and say, no, I'm not going to allow anybody to abuse me anymore, and I'm not going to self-abuse myself anymore. This is ridiculous. But until we make our minds up, until we make that decision and that commitment, it's just not going to happen. And so we have to be good to ourselves, right? So have a great day, everybody. I'll be back on tomorrow morning. I'll make sure I set the show. I actually forgot to set the show up for yesterday morning. So tomorrow morning I will be on because I'm going to set a show up for tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., same time, same place. Have a great day, everybody. And if you need something, get a hold of me here on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook, wherever. I'll be around, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day. Bye-bye.